and explain what this is. Well, y'all give me this. I said, no, I said, I hate sleeping. Get them guys that put them in 3 times his size.
I don't either. I didn't do it on the last.
They give me some more, and that was the last thing I remember. 3 days.
They give me some, when I was at,
That keeps
Raleigh
going
General,
out.
they give me enough to.
Huh?
That crash blue field
Literally,
system.
it killed me.
It keeps
For
happening.
almost 2
I mean,
years.
how much accept?
Oh, wow.
That crash blue field system.
Oh, I don't know.
It does,
You might
if you
say
think
your
it will
brother
do
will
it.
make test.
What is
Yeah,
it?
we gotta take a
If you
test.
think it will do
You
it.
can't step beside him.
It'd be funny.
You'd be like, oh, get up from the lane.
Like, sorry, Bob.
We don't know what you're doing. We just.
He's got a mean ass chain going on.
I know, right?
That's that spray in the blood can.
Ever saw that in firefight?
Do it.
She don't want to get up.
You know, since it's a holiday, you can't. We walked in here.
Yeah, you.
Hello, class.
Hello.
Hey,
Have you all seen Miss Adams?
she's
We
got
have
the
our
test.
proctor here.
Yeah.
Okay, you got the test?
No, she's got him.
All right, great. All right. If you all will, put away your notes. Get ready. We're going to pass out the test to rope.
You ain't big enough.
Excuse me?
I mean, yeah, you can enough, but you ain't big.
Okay. Say it working.
Come on.
Good luck, guys.
Cast, if you will, just stay right close, because we're going to take a few notes, knock a few things out of the park before we call in.
I can't hear him talking.
Your names afterwards. Taking those afterwards.
Can't leave. Can't go anywhere. I'm stuck in this classroom.
And make sure you put your name on each page.
Raw data is unanalyzed data. report on it. If it continues, you wanna tell Brooksville Police Department. You agree? Do you have his number? Talk to him about it. See if he can help you. True grit. I don't know why I said true grit. True grit. Tell him.
I had that.
Call the. You good, yeah. Or just call the PD and say, hey, I need true grit on it. Cause he'll call you back. Alright.
or whatever.
Was anybody still taking a test in Beckley?
We got one.
Okay.
Still trying to figure out how to read the set. Still trying to figure out how to read that one set. What line? The citizen complaint. You could have missed it. He didn't know what the Inquirer was.
You know,
That was the only gimme question on the test.
I know. It was like the easiest one. I'm sure you ain't supposed to be in some special education program.
Hey, oh, you know.
Good job. Good job. Glad you got them wrote down in this one.
I went back to the test a couple times, I think I got like 7 of those too.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Test.
You never disappoint us.
Was it citizen complaints?
You're right.
Citizen complaints.
The only one.
That's why I can tell them you're friends.
All right, y'all finished down in Beckley?
Sure are.
Okay. All right, so let's begin with, this week, I want us to have a conversation for the rest of the day, and we're gonna get into some more things on, Thursday. But to start with today, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. We're gonna talk about, something that's not necessarily in the realm of police and tactical work. We're gonna talk about some philosophy, and we're gonna talk about some, cultural things, this is today's class, and for the next couple of weeks, we're gonna kind of turn things around, and we're gonna be a little more sociology than we are police, okay? What'd you say, oh God, for? It won't be that bad.
I hate sociology.
Well, we're gonna talk about today, and we're gonna examine some things, and I want you to hang your police officer hat up, I want you to hang your correctional hat up, and I want you to kind of get out your, counselor notebook and the box of tissue. No, you don't have to do that, I'm just kidding, but hang your police hat up and let's look at things from a sociology standpoint, all right? The only person in the whole class that laughs is my buddy. I can count on you, Kenny, I appreciate you. Because what we're gonna be talking about for the next 2 weeks is cultural diversity and racial profiling. All right, so I want us to start with what is, and I want us to go around the room because cultural diversity means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the first thing I want us to know is in cultural diversity, let's talk about what is culture. What
Culture is your surroundings, the way you live.
the surroundings, the things around where you live. So what is cultural diversity?
You want different things around you, not everything the same standard.
Say that again.
You want things to be different, not everything at the same standard.
Okay, and you said?
As having different cultures, different ways of life in the same area.
Wow, okay, I like that. You got different cultures and different ways that people live life, and they're all kind of mashed up in the same area. What else?
Different religions, different everything, backgrounds,
Absolutely.
ethnical creeds.
Tell me. So you're taking different religions, you're taking different lifestyles. Some of the starkest cultural diversity that I have found right here in this country is taking somebody who lives in the Northeast or has lived in the Northeast, New York City, Philadelphia, even further up, Maine, Vermont, Boston. You take those folks and put them on a bus and ride them to Charleston, South Carolina, and let them off the bus. And not only do the people who just got off the bus who came from the Northeast have culture shock, but everybody in South Carolina has culture shock because they're very different, right? Yeah, well, talk to me about, you and I have had these discussions several times. Some of the things that you have told me from the start is, we in the mountains of southern West Virginia think nothing about darkness. If you go outside and it's dark, we go into the dark parking lot, we go over to our car and we get in our car and we go away. And she says, in the city, you don't go where it's dark. If it's dark, you just don't go there. If it's not lit up, you can't see well, you don't go. And I mean, it's just too dangerous. It's not what you do. And the other thing that you said that was big for you to get used to, and it's one of the things that I try to do on this campus a lot, and I get a lot of weird looks. And that's, I try to speak to everybody, whether I know them or not. Hi, good morning, how are you? Good morning, how is it? Hey, how are you? And I can go walking across this campus back over to Dickinson, where my office is, and between here and there, I'll probably say good morning or good afternoon or hello to 30 people. And of those 30, I might get 5, oh, hi, how are you backs? I was 100% out here in the hallway just before class started. That's never happened before. Everybody walked by me, I'd say good morning to, and everybody spoke back. That's never happened before. But even at that, we are still more social here in the mountains of Southwest Virginia and in North Carolina and South Carolina than you would be in New York. In New York and in Boston and Philadelphia, you don't walk by people and say good morning or good afternoon if you don't know them. You don't speak.
Too many people for you to.
But it's a difference in culture.
Yeah.
If you walk by and say good afternoon to somebody you don't know, he's going to look at you and say, what's your problem?
Some people might cut you out.
Yeah.
What
are you speaking to me for? They might cuss you out.
Yeah.
I know this has nothing to do with it, but I was thinking about how I was going to present this lesson last night as I was sitting at home and I was watching TV. And some of you have mentioned this before, and we've mentioned it in another class, and some of you not. Have you all ever seen those 4 guys called Impractical Jokers on TV? Yeah. They're idiots.
Yeah.
Well, they did a little social experiment, and I was watching one of their shows last night, and they did a little thing where the skit was they took these straws into this restaurant, and they had to try to sneak a drink out of somebody else's drink, right, with these big long straws. And they couldn't get caught. If they succeeded and got the drink, then they won the little competition. If they got caught, then they lost. But here's what I found was so very interesting about that. He sat down next to a table with 3 women. And one of the women was probably in her 50s, and the other 2 women were probably in their 30s. And he reached out with the straw and began to try to have a conversation with them to lead up to taking a drink out of that woman's drink. And the older woman was so very nice, but so very forceful. She looked at him and said, "Excuse me, this is our time. Please leave us alone." And I thought to myself, you wouldn't get that response in the Deep South. And in fact, she went out of her way to try to be nice to him, not to go off on him and be like, "Jerk, what are you doing?" Right? And I don't know if she could see the cameras or not. Maybe that's why she didn't go off on him, but maybe they were hidden. But I just noticed she was so very firm and forceful with how she stopped his interaction into their group. And we normally wouldn't do something like that in the Deep South. If somebody tried to interject themselves in our group in the Deep South, most of the time we let them in, right? "Yeah, come on over, sit down. Listen, what are you doing? Why are you doing that big goofy looking straw? You look like an idiot. What are you doing? What's up?" And so you would let them in. And so I began to talk about, we live in a mobile earth. We live in a very, 50 years ago, to travel from our little mountain area here to, I was thinking about vacation. You said horseback, threw me off. I was thinking about going on vacation. Myrtle Beach. To leave from here to go to Myrtle Beach 50 years ago would have been a huge undertaking. Huge. In fact, not many people would have done it 50 years ago. There would have been a few people, the more affluent might have tried it, but most of us, middle class folks, wouldn't go. Well, 25 years ago, just about everybody goes. And now, going to Myrtle Beach is nothing. Most people talk about, you see these commercials on TV now for Atlantis, the all-inclusive paid vacation spot. I know, I talk to people all the time who talk about going there, say it's the best vacation value ever. Well, I could 10 years ago, who would have ever thought about getting on a plane and flying to this all-inclusive vacation spot in the Bahamas called Atlantis and staying 4 or 5 days and flying back. Nobody would have thought of that. We live in a world where transportation and moving about becomes so easy. So you're going to take hundreds, if not thousands of years of tradition, of lifestyle, of culture, and you're going to begin to see people mash those together, right? 30 years ago, it would have been unthinkable for you to come to Boston down here to school. Too much distance.
It was still unthinkable when
Really?
I wasn't supposed to be
I'm glad you're here. But the point I'm making is it becomes so easy to come here from New York to be mobile, to move about. And you bring with you, everywhere you go, whether you're aware of it or not, you bring with you your culture, your experience, your life. Imagine it's a big backpack on your back, and you bring it with you everywhere you go. And you walk with it through life. And that backpack influences everything that you see. Right? It's almost like you got a big pair of goggles in there, and that backpack, you put those goggles on, and those goggles influence your perception of events. Because my perception of the events on that TV show was that woman is a bad word. She's a beep, beep, you know. But then I got to thinking about it. Probably based on her culture, where she was from, and her experience, and how people aren't as social, she probably was a really nice lady who was trying very hard not to be ugly to this cat, right? So I had to take off my goggles out of my backpack and put them back in my backpack and look at this situation with a little more unbiased look, right? So when we talk about cultural diversity, what we're going to be talking about as we move forward with cultural diversity and racial profiling and all of those things as it pertains to law enforcement is being able to take off these goggles that we wear that is our life experience and be able to look at the information unbiased, right? And sometimes it takes us a minute, because it took me a minute last night. I was staring at, go ahead and sneeze, it won't hurt nothing.
That's why I'm having a hard time.
That's why it took me a while last night when I looked at that woman, because your knee-jerk reaction is to judge her with the information that you've always used, right? With the information that you carry. But you have to stop and think about it a minute. I can't always use that as my ruler, because my ruler may not always be the right ruler to use. Sometimes we've got to take those goggles off and look at it through unbiased lenses. It means we have to get out of our own culture, our own history, this own backpack that we carry with us, and move it out of the way. So I tell you all that because now we're going to start to have a discussion about, we've all come to an agreement about what cultural diversity is, and now I want us to look at a couple of topics, and I want us to have a talk about what those mean and how they're going to affect the police, us as police officers. But I want us to remove our cultural goggles and let's look at it as information. And I also want us to be able to sometimes discuss these cultural goggles that we wear. I just want you to be aware they're on. So let's imagine for a minute that we live in small town USA. And in small town USA, we've got about, I don't know, what's the size of Bluefield? Bluefield got 50,000 people?
God.
I thought it was like 32.
Okay, I wasn't far off. I was only 20,000 off, so let's call it 35,000.
That's this.
All right? Let's say we got 35,000 in Bluefield, in small town. We're about the same size as Bluefield. And let's say that our police department mirrors our community. And I ain't 100% sure about the exact numbers, but I'm reasonably close here. Let's say in small town West Virginia, we've got 80% white people, we have 15% African Americans, and we have 5% Asians and Latinos, somewhere roughly in there. And our police department mirrors our community. It's about 80% white, it's about 15% African American, and we have about 5% Asians or Latinos, Hispanics, however you want to word that. what would our arrests look like? Because, let me back up a minute. What does our arrest look like in Bluefield? Is our arrest a mirror of our police department and a mirror of our community? Do we arrest in Bluefield? Is our arrest 80% white, 15% African American, 5% Asian Latino?
No,
You think probably?
Yeah.
No.
no, it's probably 60% more black.
I would say probably 60 to 70% African American arrests. I'd say that's right. And probably where else are we?
Your whites are probably the lowest arrest.
Say that again?
The whites are probably the lowest arrest rate.
The lowest. Maybe. I like that. You say whites are probably about 25?
I'd say 25 and then, because that only leaves, well, but leaves 15%, that's the only other.
And so the others, you'd think the others would be, whites might be 30 and then 10%?
Yeah.
And that's a reasonable breakdown. That's a reasonable breakdown. And that's probably a reasonable breakdown for small town. So what I want to ask you is how do we as a police department go about making our arrests mirror our community and our law enforcement?
Well, there's only so much you can change in that scenario.
Say again?
There's only so much you can change in that scenario. You know, you can do your part on it, but criminals are still going to be criminals no matter what.
Okay, I like that. Yes, ma'am. How does that help? Your approach could be different, and there's a certain amount of truth to what both of you are saying. Criminals are going to be criminals, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And you change your approach, and you get a better result. Here's one of the things that I think we've got to think about, and I want you all to think about. In Virginia, in 1989 or 1990, I don't remember what year it was, they passed a law that said, if you have rock cocaine, then you have base. It's in its purest form. And since you have base, we're going to enhance the sentence of anyone who has base.
You're saying B-A-S-E, right?
Yeah, base. Base cocaine or pure cocaine, more pure cocaine. By
I
making
thought that was done nationwide, not just in Virginia.
Well, but you had to be charged with a federal crime for it to be nationwide.
Okay.
You had to be charged with a federal crime, and I'm going there. And a lot of other states also adopted it after the federal government did. So it was if you were charged with a state crime, if you were arrested with crack cocaine in the states, it would be a state crime. You had to actually commit a federal offense, and it'd be a federal crime before they would use the sentence enhancements there on the federal level. But you are correct. So they enhanced your sentence. So in other words, if you'd gotten caught with 4 grams of powder, your sentence might have been 3 years or 5 years, whatever it would be. It's double that or triple that if you had base or crack cocaine, rock cocaine. Now, whether it was intended to or not, here's what we know about culture. Who are the highest users of crack cocaine?
African Americans.
African Americans. African Americans are the highest users of crack cocaine. I don't know what the cultural issue is. Say again?
No, I'm confused.
Price is a cultural issue.
Difference is. I don't know what the cultural issue is. I think it's an issue of affordability.
It is. It's a price issue.
It's a price issue. I think it's an issue of affordability. You can buy a crack rock for $25 and be high for several hours. You know, $25 piece, $10 piece, whatever. And so it was an affordability issue. And that law, whether it was intended to or not, disproportionately put African Americans in prison for longer periods of time.
Disparaging.
you could have a white guy who got arrested with 4 grams of powder, who got 5 years, and a black guy who got arrested with 4 grams of rock, and he got 15. So there was some racial disparity there in sentencing. As of 2 years ago, the governor in Virginia, not only did he do away with that law, the sentence enhancement, but he also is going back to that group of offenders who qualify and reducing their sentence to try to bring about some equality and some fairness in the sentencing of that. So as we create laws, as we vote for those folks who are going to create our laws, we need to be aware of, can they look at life through a culturally diverse lens? Can they look at life taking into account other people's traditions, their heritage, their lifestyle? Because what do we know about substance abuse? Regardless of what color your skin is, regardless of where you come from in the world, what do we know about substance abuse?
It's a problem.
Well, it is
Everywhere.
a problem. And here's what I'm going to tell you about substance abuse, and never, ever, ever forget it. In fact, this will be a test question, I promise. Substance abuse, I can't even say the words right. Substance abuse is a chronic, reoccurring brain disease.
I thought drugs were so much more expensive.
Some of them are, some of them not. Absolutely. I'm getting some blowback up here. I like it. We're going to have a conversation. I like it. Substance abuse is a chronic, reoccurring brain disease. I got some funny looks. We're going to have a good conversation today. Today's going to be a good class. I like it. Please share. Yeah, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You're not going to make me mad. I like it. I like it whenever somebody has a different line of convince me I'm wrong.
I don't disagree, but I know that, I agree with you, but, I know that a lot of people look at it as a weakness rather than a disease.
Absolutely, I'm sure they do. And a lot of people look at it as a personal choice, which it is not. I mean, now, don't get me wrong.
Self-inflicted disease.
Say again?
It is a self-inflicted disease.
It is very much a self-inflicted disease. It is very much. It is very much, the first time somebody uses drugs, it is absolutely a self-inflicted personal choice. Absolutely. That's why drug education plays such a big part in what we try to do. But once people begin to use drugs, it's not a choice anymore. And here's what happens. And we'll do this briefly, and then we'll move on. But here's what happens. Let's say, I know a guy who just had knee surgery. All right, he was playing some sports in college. He tore. Y'all help me with these medical terms.
ACL.
Close. It was a meniscus. Meniscus. So he tore a meniscus. Now, that's the only real part of this story. Everything else I'm getting ready to make up, but I'm trying to get to a greater point. I know this guy who was playing sports in college, and he tore his meniscus. Now, let's just say, for example, that during his surgery to repair his meniscus, that the doctor wrote him some Oxycontin 40s and some Loratab 20s. Okay? And this is to manage pain. Because whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not only is the injury painful, but the recovery is extremely excruciating. And it's long. You don't just hop up out of bed after ACL, meniscus, and that kind of surgery and be, oh yeah, I'm okay, a couple of weeks, I'm good. That's not how this works. It hurts for weeks. So it's a legitimate doctor order to manage some pain. People shouldn't be in excruciating pain. So it's a legitimate thing to manage that pain and write those prescriptions. Say again?
Well, for one, those prescriptions are way excessive for that kind of injury.
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I'm just throwing out numbers.
Well, but it could
Right
also
with
be
me.
if he played sports in college, he was probably
Tone them down, call it an Oxycontin 20 and a Lortab 10. Don't hold me to the specifics here, I'm just talking about, I'm gonna get to a bigger point, and I'm not a doctor, but y'all get my point, you get my meaning. So, anyway, as we ride on through this story, in 6 months, he's off his crutches, he's moving about, but he finds that he has grown very reliant, very dependent on those Oxycontins and those Lortabs. He needs them. He can't function without them. Well, here's what happens in the mind. Here's what happens in the brain. Okay? In the brain, we have what's called dopamine receptors. And those dopamine receptors get dopamine from the centers in the brain, and that gives us a feeling of normalcy, of goodness, of well-being. Now, dopamine doesn't make us high, it doesn't completely jack us up, it doesn't make us go crazy.
Pleasure.
It's not even pleasure. It's not even pleasure. Dopamine just gives you a feeling of, I'm okay, life's good, I feel good, everything around me is the way it should be, I'm good. It's good. It's a feeling of normalcy, right? And so when you don't have that dopamine, you begin to feel pain and sick and like the world's not right and that something's wrong with you and you feel bad and you're sick and you're not right and you got to go to the doctor and it's like you woke up with the flu times 40 so what happens with that is that while he was taking that medicine to work on his knee, the dopamine receptors in his brain got occupied by the chemicals in that drug, and they no longer accept dopamine. They're accepting the chemicals of that drug. And when he quit taking that drug, the dopamine is up there knocking on the door, but the receptors don't care. Right, can't get in. The receptors don't care. The receptors could care less what the dopamine's doing. They want the drug. And so he begins to feel worse and worse and worse and worse. Same thing happens with alcohol as it happens with drugs. All right? Now, the only way he can convince himself that he is not dying is to find more of that drug. Because remember, I told you, without the dopamine, he starts to feel worse and worse. He starts to feel like his world's not right. He starts to feel like he can't make it. He's sicker and sicker and sicker. And then there's this little part in the center of your brain, and it controls the emergency signals in your brain. So in other words, when you, and I'm switching gears here a minute, let's say that you fall into an icy pond. When you fall into that icy pond and you start to freeze and you're shivering and you're getting hypothermia, what is really happening is that core in the center of your brain says, oh, wow, we just got really cold. In order to keep the body alive as long as possible, we're going to shut down blood flow to all the extremities, and we're only going to pump it to two things: the lungs, the heart, and the brain. Everything else doesn't get anything else. Well, I'm sorry, three things. Yeah, everybody's a critic. And so the lungs, the heart, and the brain is all that gets the blood. The extremities don't get it, and so they begin to shiver and tremble, and they turn blue, and then you get frostbite and all those things that happen. And that little part in the brain tells the rest of the body, get ready, you're going to die. If you don't get warm, you're going to die. And the body reacts to that. Okay? Same thing happens in the human brain of drug abuse. The brain tells the body, if you don't get more of the drug, you are going to die. And the people, now we know as sober, unaddicted adults who are well educated that that's not reality. You can't convince somebody who's using that drug that that's not reality. They are convinced that they are literally going to die. And they will tell you, if I do not get this fix, I will die. And they mean it. They believe it, yes.
Is that the same with alcohol too?
It's the same with alcohol too, yes. They believe if they don't get another drink, they will die. It is the exact same phenomenon. Now, here's the difference. Here is the difference. In recovery, when we have studied the brain activity of recovering addicts, and they do MRIs, they do special studies, they look at them every way you can think about looking at them. Here is the difference. In 6 to 8 months, those dopamine receptors clear up and they can begin to feel normal again in about 6 to 8 months. Okay? Those dopamine receptors open up, they start to feel normal, the effects of the alcohol starts to subside in the brain, and they begin to make some sort of a recovery. And they can make a recovery, and they can begin to feel normal again in about 6 to 8 months. We have looked at the dopamine receptors of people who are on cocaine, heroin, PCP, and a lot of prescription drugs, and their dopamine receptors are not cleared up 5 years later. 5 years later, they're still working with the same, I get up every morning, I'm sick, I feel bad, I'm going to die. If I don't get my fix, I'm not going to make it through the day. They feel the same way in 5 years as they do on day 2. They learn coping skills to learn to deal with that. And that's why it is a chronic, reoccurring brain disease. Would you argue with that?
I would, because that's just like the same thing with a massive injury. It may take 2 to 3 years just to recover from one injury.
It does.
It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
And you cope with it, and you get the hell over it.
You can't get to hell. You can't, I was going to say the hell. You can't get over you can't get over a brain injury. You can't get over a brain injury. You learn to cope with it, but you don't ever get over it. And I like you, and I agree with some of what you're saying, but there's some things like a traumatic brain injury. There are people, I saw a dude once upon a time, no kidding, brightest guy I ever knew, one of the smartest people I ever knew. He lived on a farm in Russell County. He is probably 10 years older than me. He was going to Virginia Tech, ag science. He was going to knock it out of the park. He was going to be great. The summer of his sophomore year, he and his father were at home, and they were shoeing a horse. And something happened, and that horse kicked him in the forehead. He went from being one of the most intelligent people I know to one of the biggest dummies I knew. And his personality went from being very accommodating to being very confrontational. He never got over that. He's like that to this day. I could take you to his house to this day and knock on the door, and he'd answer the door and say, "What do you want? Am I going to have to fight you?" That'd be the first things out of his mouth. I mean, some things you just like that head trauma, you just can't ever get over. You just learn those coping skills. Same thing with substance abuse. It is going to be a chronic, reoccurring brain disease that lasts forever and ever and ever. And so therein is where you lie in the problem. So, who?
High risk takers, like people who jump out of airplanes.
The difference.
It's with the dopamine receptor.
The difference is that there's no long-term effect after you jump out of the plane. You get your little high and you move on. The dope, the cocaine and the stuff that lasts. Yes, sir. Your question?
Well, if we scientifically know that's the way things work with that medication, why do we not put the responsibility on the doctors once they prescribe this medicine that there has to be aftercare?
And that is a beautiful question. I like that. Why do we as a society not demand that there should be some aftercare, some education, some counseling? I don't know. I can't answer that. I think it should be. And here's the other thing. I think that we as a society should demand that we have pain medicine that does not have addictive properties, that does not mess with our dopamine. We can put a man on the moon, but we can't find a pain medicine that simply blocks the pain that doesn't affect with our dopamine receptors. I find that hard to believe. So I like your question, and in all reality, I don't have an answer to it, except society hadn't demanded it yet. You have a culture of people who like those drugs, who don't want you to do anything with them. And so it becomes hard to do that. All right. I like where we've gone so far. So, my next question. I would like to know if you think that the southern West Virginia or the West Virginia population of Asians and Hispanics are overrepresented in the criminal justice system or underrepresented in the criminal justice system, and why?
I think Hispanics are probably, represented pretty fairly, but the Asian population is very under.
Okay? He says Hispanics are probably, reasonably represented, but that Asians are very underrepresented. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
It just appears.
Say it louder. I like where you're going. There are several. Yeah.
Well, but I'm kind of on the fence too, because I'm just thinking people that have come to the United States, Asians, Hispanics, their family come here. There's not really a lot here that they would come specifically to Southern West Virginia for.
Every one of your doctors are Asian.
Well, it could go both ways, but I'm just thinking here in Princeton, like you said, there's
Well,
not
let's think
a
about Southern West
lot.
Virginia. Let's call Southern West Virginia Charleston here.
Well, then I don't know much about Charleston.
Well, I think there's an adequate representation of Hispanics in Southern West Virginia. There's, from Charleston here, you're probably talking about 3 to 4, maybe 5% of the population, which is not quite as high as say North Carolina. North Carolina probably has like 18, 20.
Easily.
So, but my issue is, let's talk about just in criminal justice terms. When you look at the folks that get pulled over, get arrested, get tickets, go to court, are Hispanics and Asians over or underrepresented in the court system as far as being arrested, as far as getting tickets, as far as getting summonses, or not?
I'm referring to as far as represented by police officers. There is no Asian police force in Southern West Virginia.
I totally agree with where you're coming from. I think you got the right answer, but I want to pull something out of this bunch down here. I'm with you. I'm riding with you. I think you're right. But here's my next question. I think he's 100% right. I think that the Hispanic community is probably fairly reasonably represented in Southern West Virginia as far as encounters with law enforcement. But I think that the Asian community is probably underrepresented. Why do you think that is? Do you think that it's a cultural difference between Asians and Hispanics and African Americans and white that makes them so underrepresented in criminal justice system? Or do you think it's just that they don't get picked out and singled out? I mean, what is it with them that keeps them from, or that causes them to be a little underrepresented?
Most of your Asians, it's morals. They're taught better morals than we are. Most of your Asians here are doctors, things like that. They don't get in a whole lot of trouble.
The Asians? All right. So where does your belief that that's the case come from?
Just their history. You look at the history of your Asians. They're taught a lot better. They act a lot better. They don't have none of the crime rate we have. Of course they have gangs and things, but their regular crime is nowhere near what ours is.
So basically what happens is, basically, if I understand what you're telling me, is their family unit's really close. And they're taught from early childhood, you don't bring shame on the family. Isn't that right?
Yep.
Right.
And so that causes
education.
That causes them to have a great deal of underrepresentation. In other words, you're going to find some of the folks who break the law and who do some things, but by and large, statistically, there probably not going to be that many. Do you think that bringing those folks in to the United States and allowing them to be immersed in Western culture is going to enhance their family unit or break down their family unit? What do y'all think? I've got a couple breakdowns.
They'll get less traditional.
That all depends on the individuals themselves.
It all depends on the individuals themselves.
I think it also depends on the parents too. If their parents were born here, it would probably be a lot different than if they weren't born here. I think. It just depends on culture.
You think what? Oh, really? You think it would be where they live at?
Yeah.
So depending if they lived in a community that was kind of traditional and very reserved, they might hold it together, whereas if they were in some more of a liberal place, it might be a little harder to do that. Wow, is it?
It is, but,
I think there's just not a lot of them, so that's.
yeah, that's what I, yeah.
So if we look at a national view, nationally, and I'll pull out the statistics and bring it with me, I didn't bring it with me today, but nationally, Asians make up a very, very small population of people who are incarcerated in our nation.
But there's still Asian gangs
Everywhere.
in America.
In America. So do you think those Asian gangs in America is a result of the American culture, or do you think it's a result of the culture that they brought with them when they came to America?
It's both combined.
You think it might be both? You think it might be some resentment? I like it.
Well, because, you know, the Asian gangs, most of the time, you're not gonna see an Asian gang with an African American or something in it, you know what I mean?
Well,
They stick
I think
together,
that
right?
goes back to their.
I think you would do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, they
Of the
brought
close
that
family
with them.
unit.
I would agree with that, except I would argue with, I think that you would see an Asian gang more readily accept someone of another race than would, say, the Ku Klux Klan, or would,
Yeah.
say, even an African American gang would be less likely to take in a Latino, or less likely to take in a Asian person. And I think the Asians would be more likely to take in other groups. I think they would be more open. Say again? There are a lot of Asians where you live?
Chinatown, yeah, Chinatown, you know, there's a
All
lot
right.
of.
We've got a good start. You all did well on your test. We've got a good start on this week's topic. You all, no homework assignment until Thursday. You all enjoy. We will see you on Thursday. We're going to jump off some more diversity. Thank you, Beck.
Have a good one.
I'm going to go get me some lunch, and then I'm going to my office.
I got 90.
I've got 80, something like that, I don't know.
You got time. Thank you. That's all right. There ain't nothing wrong with that either. Good. It's good work. But just, but what you have to understand is, understand that before you time. What you really need to do before you do any of that, you need to be on patrol for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, and so you've got plenty of time to think about it. Thank you. You got plenty of time to think about it.
Did you look on Facebook yet? Yeah.
Some people have their numbers up there.
Is it a cell phone number? Call it on your phone.
We tried to call it, it went.
It's ringing and what is it one of text and app numbers maybe? Is it a funny phone number?
It's a 304.
Oh, okay.
Have you white paged it?
Huh?
I got a bunch of 304 numbers. Hold on. Let me go into my contacts and just type it in.
See you on Thursday.
All right, see you on Thursday. Did you do good on this test?
Maybe. There were a few that I was just
4-0.
like, iffy on,
Anybody I
We're
know.
gonna have to start reviewing.
yeah.
Bye.
Is it calling you or her?
It's a cell phone.
It's definitely a cell phone from Riceville.
Yeah, it's definitely a cell phone. And 278 could be anybody,
It says
actually.
Riceville.
That's just where the cell phone came out of. It doesn't mean that's where they're at. You'd have to have a court order to find out actually who that is, probably.
Yeah, I run into that. I got some text one time from an IP address like that.
Huh?
Ryansville, West Virginia.
Yeah, you're gonna have to report that, because that's one of those internet crime things, and like I said, he's texting from an IP address, it's computer, they're virtually impossible to trace.
That's up there, boy.
That's what
That's a long way.
it's whoever it is somebody with some authority.
What do you mean with authority?
Like, when he said, I put your name up in the thing, whoever it is, got to bring.
vouch you, they said, they confirmed
You
that
just
they
said,
got in.
what's your favorite game? Mine is following without you knowing.
This is freaky. I
Tell me where
would,
it is.
now, 4 years ago, I would enter this very different. And his cousin too, whoever it is, they are
You want
cousins.
the
May not be
number?
a he. I would almost probably think that's the safe place.
Well, I told her to give it to,
Following years out,
It says
Sure.
here.
she's read surgery.
oh, did he?
If you wanna take it to Blue Hills PD, take it to him or Dylan. Either one. They both know me.
And we give it to the guy here on campus, but he's not too excited about being with the
I mean, well, this is, okay, so first is following in without you knowing, and then down here, he starts, whoever it is cousin.
You get disrespectful, you got people watching you.
I have no idea what it is. Yeah, and he's talking about you will have to see the actuality and realization. You need to take this to the cops.
I don't think so.
I would.
Why, you
I
don't
would.
wait,
That's threatening.
you don't wait.
I wouldn't wait. This could be some crazy backwards ones.